Dr. Jazz.
I wanted to ask about You've Been Warned. I listened to it, and it's such a beautiful record. And everyone wrote the music. And what's the story behind this trio? Like, I mean, obviously you and Billy are together, but still, like, how did you connect with Harvie? And what's the story behind the record also?
Well, I've known Harvie since the 90s, and I think Billy has known Harvie since the 1970s. So that, we all go back a long way, played together a lot. And during COVID, there weren't a lot of opportunities to play. And so what we would do is, Harvie would come over, we'd all mask up, we'd open all the windows, we'd keep our distancing, and we'd play in the house. And Harvie started doing some recording, and
Okay.
he said, "Hey, I could record us. Why don't we try to make a recording?" And he, so it was nice to be able to record on my own piano, my own Steinway. I've never done that before, and Harvie's gotten really good at getting good sounds. And we were all in the same room, of course, no separation, which is the old school way.
Beautiful,
and some would say the best way. There's a certain intimacy that you just can't get having everybody in different rooms and with headphones on. It really changes things. So it was really nice. We're all in the same room, and we took our time, recorded over a couple of days. And then when we finished mixing it and mastering it, I thought we might just put it out ourselves. That's how I put out a lot of my own records independently over the last few years, just because it's just a lot frankly, to deal with. Record companies usually, it's just not worth the trouble anymore.
It's a different business nowadays.
But I thought, yeah, exactly. And I just thought, well, there's one label, maybe I'll reach out to this guy, Francois, at Sunnyside Records.
Yeah.
We've always, been in contact with each other. And just, I'd run into him, at the conferences and things like that, and say hello. So I just figured, what the heck, what's the worst that can happen, And I mentioned it to him. I sent him an email. He said, "Sure, send me the links." And I sent it, and I didn't hear back for a few weeks. And I thought, all right, that's that. Didn't really expect anything. And then just when I'd given up, he emailed me back and said, "Yeah, we want to put it out. And how's next August?" Which at that point was only like a year away, which is kind of a miracle,
Yeah.
So it was nice, to have a record on Sunnyside. It's a great label. I have a lot of peers that I have great respect for who are on that label, and Francois has done a great job establishing the label over many years. So it's really pleasure and an honor to be on Sunnyside, and I'm really happy with how it worked out, especially since it's funny when you go on. I don't want to go speak against any sort of orthodoxy, but when you go online and there are all these people telling you how to advance your music career, they tell you all these things you have to do, and I've done some of those things, but honestly, this just happened so effortlessly. It was kind of like, why am I wasting any energy doing any of these other things when it was so effortless? It was Harvie's idea to record. We were all just playing together, and then I sent one email. I wasn't like I shopped the record to 30 labels. I literally sent it to one label and said, if they don't put it out, we'll put it out ourselves. And that one label I sent it to offered to put it out. It was just so effortless. It was the opposite of all the effort I've made in my life to try to make things happen musically and in my career. And maybe it was kind of a lesson for me, to just like stop trying with all that stuff and just see what comes to you,
Yeah. Now it's funny nowadays. Anyway, with labels, I'm puzzled what to do always when I have a master of a record, and I've done records with Clean Feet and Steeplechase and blah blah some others, but then I'm always like, shit, should I put it out myself or shop it around? Because unless you're on Verve or whatever, Blue Note, it's almost like, you know, it's hard to decide what to do actually. But I'm glad, you know, Sunnyside is such a nice label. Yeah, like you said, it's a beautiful roster of artists they have, and so nice to have you there.
Yeah, and I appreciate like other labels that I've released records on in the past. I won't mention their names, but it's easy to look them up. You know, they always want to take your publishing rights, you know, and then they claim they're going to send you, they claim they're going to send you an accounting of what you're owed for your publishing and all that, and for the record sold. And they never do. They never send you anything. They just take your rights to your music. And with Sunnyside, not only did he not ask for my publishing rights, but we've actually been getting emails documenting like how many downloads, how many sales, you know, and that sort of thing. So they've been very professional about it. So, you know, but that was one of the reasons I agree with you that, you know, in the past, I got so fed up with a lot of these labels and how they, you know, how they do business that I just said, I might as well just do it myself. And yeah, unless you're on a major label, they don't really do much for you in terms of promotion or anything. So I have done several records on my own, but in this case, it really worked out. And I will say that the other record I have out recently, which is the record on ESP Disc with Mark Reboul and Billy Mintz,
I saw that.
called 7 People About an Hour. Yeah, that record, I believe he is doing some advertising. So that was a nice surprise too, like a record label that is not a major label that is doing some advertising. It's an important label, but not major in the sense of, you know, having its own distribution and being a big corporation that you know, that they also are doing some advertising. So that's it's amazing that these records on two well-respected labels just kind of fell into my lap, you know.
Did you guys play gigs with this trio, with Billy and Harvie? I mean, did you promote the record?
We've done a few gigs. Well, over the years, like I actually had a trio back in the 90s with Harvie S. and Jeff Williams, and we did a bunch of gigs. In fact, we did a live record at the Blue Note Club, live at the Blue Note, many, like over 2 decades ago.
That's with John O'Gallagher, right? Also.
That's right. He's a special guest on the record.
Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah, also player. But this, we did a few. I'm trying to remember where we played. I think we played at Mesro a few times over the last few years, actually, not just for the record, but in general. We played at Mesro in the city, a few other places, you know. So we've done some gigs together. We actually, the three of us just played. Harvie's doing a thing at the Colstein, the bass shop in the city, and he does a weekly jam session now, and you know, the house band every week, different house band, and the band does a set before people come and sit in, and the three of us played, and we played we played several tunes from this record. So yeah, you know, over the years we've all gigged together in different configurations.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's such a nice interplay you have, you know, when.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you know, Harvie and Billy, they're great musicians, and they're mature musicians. I don't mean necessarily their age, although of course with age comes more maturity, but you know, they're just very mature players. You know, they are very musical. You know, they're there to serve the music, and that's just the best thing, you know. That's the greatest thing when you have that. They make it really easy. You know, they're really good listeners.
Yeah, that's the most important. Yeah, then it's really easy. But I wanted to ask you about your music. You know, I mentioned that everyone wrote, you know, Billy wrote and Harvie and yourself as well. And I always liked your composing, and also for this records, there are some really nice tunes you wrote. Like I like this one, Remorse and Acceptance, which kind of, I think it ends the record. Like, what's your process there when you write music? Like, did you have this trio in mind, or do you have like a sketchbook of tunes and you just, I mean, what's your process when writing music, actually, I mean, in general?
Well, first I want to say that I wrote all three of the three tunes of mine that are on this record. We each contributed 3 tunes, and the 3 tunes of mine are all pretty old. They're all tunes that I've never recorded on any of my records, never been recorded before. So that was one of my criteria for choosing them for this record. I have, different processes. Sometimes I'll set myself sort of an assignment, if you will,
That's
where
smart, yeah.
I'm thinking about a certain goal or tune, something I want to write. Actually, I think Remorse and Senses might have been for a recording that ended up not happening. But I was invited to do actually the recording happened, but then the records had to be destroyed because one of the musicians didn't know that it was going to be released and got upset, and the whole thing had to be destroyed. That's another story. I won't go into that, but that's what I think I wrote this Remorse and Senses. Just somebody called me like a week ahead of time and said, we're doing this session, bring a tune, we're going to record. So I just wrote this tune really quickly, and it was it's I don't really like to think chordally. It doesn't mean I'm not thinking harmonically, but I don't like to think chordally. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll think more in terms of I'm sorry, I'm thinking more contrapuntally,
yeah.
Or I'm thinking more in terms of harmony, but I'll name the chord after I figure out what the notes are, rather than thinking like, oh, G minor, A minor, 7/5, whatever. I'll just, I'll just kind of think about the sound that I want. And once I have that sound, then I'll say, oh, it looks like I could call that chord, whatever, like, E over C over A flat, something that's not necessarily a functional chord, so I tend to write a little more that way. Not always, but that's one of the methods that I use, and I think that came into play in that tune. I knew I wanted to write something kind of free and open.
It's kind of ornettish almost when you go.
Yeah, right. It's very harmonically, the melody is very specific. The chord, the harmony on the melody is very specific. But once we start blowing, it's just, there's time, but there are no explicit chord changes. There's a, kind of a burning, walking feel, but there are no time changes. We're just creating the changes as we go along.
Yeah, I like that, to hear you guys in that more open kind of, really stretching out. I love those contexts always. Then you really get to hear the trio. I mean, this trio, I like that. Nice one. Yeah.
Well, it's so great because, like Harvie and Billy can play straight ahead, and they can both play more free and open, because they're such great musicians, and they have so much experience just doing everything. So, there's no question of like, oh, this is a straight ahead musician trying to play free, or vice versa. They're both really well versed and just great musicians.
Yeah. Do you still write music otherwise nowadays? I mean, are you always composing, or?
Do I write? I don't compose as often as I used to. I've written in the last few years, but honestly, I'm not feeling as motivated. I've done a few arrangements. I work with the drummer Victor Jones, and he has a large ensemble, and I've written a couple of arrangements of other people's tunes for the band. So I really like doing that. And I've written a few lyrics for a few of Billy's tunes, because I'm sort of a closet singer, and so I've written a few lyrics for some of Billy's tunes. Sometimes they're kind of tongue-in-cheek. They're meant to be a little humorous. But yeah, I haven't been as motivated to compose lately. I'm not sure why. I think some of it is just having a stack of tunes that are not really, are just kind of sitting there. Yeah. I guess I feel like I've sort of written all the tunes of the types of tunes that I wanted to write. Like I've written straight A tunes, I've written free tunes, I've written burners, I've written waltzes, I've written bossa novas. I just feel like I'm kind of, I don't want to repeat myself. If I really thought of something new, I would do it. My friend Virginia Mayhew has a record coming out, and she recorded a couple of my tunes actually on her record. I was really honored by that. So that's a nice thing. I think the other reason I haven't been composing much is I've been maybe more focused on the piano and just playing, and just developing as a pianist. It's infinite. You can always just keep getting better. So that's something I've been very focused on, and, you know, playing classical music, practicing just playing solo piano, which is a huge challenge, you know. So those are some things I've been working on.
Yeah, no, but I know exactly. I know exactly. But I sometimes write like I don't know, a 7/4 something tune, and I'm like, shit, do you need that another 7/4 vamp with a head over? But yeah, it's
like I've written like 2 or 3 7/4 tunes. I don't really need to write another one. Yeah,
I know exactly. Yeah,
I would like to maybe write some bigger ensembles. You know, I've done a little bit of that. Some of my records have you know, sextet and septets on them, but it's, you know, I'd like to maybe write more that way, or maybe arrange some of my compositions that I've already written for some larger ensembles. But yeah, just keep writing more tunes. Not sure it really interests me right now.
Yeah. No, I know. It's hard to get motivated. Like, I don't know. We should ask, like, many times, you know, players who compose, like older players than us, like, and they compose like 400 tunes, and some look the same, but still, it's in the end, it's their language also. So it's like that's the thing, you know, I question myself then as a player and as a composer. So I don't know whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think you just have to do what works for you. I mean,
yeah,
there are lots of, you know, players who've written like some really great tunes, and they keep on writing, and that's great. And you know, I think it's just wherever you want to put your focus. I mean, I don't think it's so much a question about motivation. I mean, I feel like I'm motivated to in music in general, just maybe not to write tunes, but in other areas I'm very motivated, you know, to keep getting better. I keep listening back to gigs, to just keep you know, hearing where things that I could have done differently.
Yeah, that's always good. Yeah. Otherwise, Roberta, I wanted to ask you, how did you start with jazz, and what got you excited? When was that moment when you said, like, shit, I want to do that? Did you have like a specific moment? Like,
yeah, I did actually. So when I came from a musical family. My father was a composer, and he gave me my first piano lessons when I was maybe around 6 or 7 years old. And unfortunately, he passed away when I was very young. I was 8 years old. He was a lot older, and he passed away. And I was always kind of into music, but after he passed away, I wasn't as focused on it. And then, you know, I kind of got into music when I was like in my middle school years. And I just noticed that I had some talent and ability. And then it was actually my older brother, Joe, who got me interested in jazz. He got really into jazz, and he's about 10 years older than me. So he was already in his early 20s, and he was taking some lessons with Walter Bishop, the great pianist Walter Bishop Jr. And he was listening to jazz, and it's kind of funny now. I remember being in the car with him, and he had the radio on. And I remember saying to him, like, "Oh, this music sounds the same to me," you know. and he said, "Well, that's you know, as you listen to it more, you'll hear more of the subtle and not so subtle differences." And of course, he was right. And I've actually used that line to people when I hear people say, "Oh, everything you played sounds the same." I said, "Well, the more you listen to jazz, the more, you know, any music, it's all going to sound the same until you listen to it." So then when I started kind of getting interested in jazz, and then I found this old record. It was actually a Walter Bishop Jr. record, and I knew his name because I knew my brother was studying with him. And it was a Muse record called Speak Low, and it's a great record. It's got a picture of Walter Bishop smoking a cigarette, which of course they never do now. This is the early 60s. On the cover. I think he's smoking a cigarette. I remember some whiff of smoke or something. Anyway, a whiff of smoke. Anyway, so I combined whiff and waft, but the whiff of smoke. Anyway, so they were selling this record. They had like 10 copies of this record at this like bazaar, like a sale, you know, like they were having like a what do they call it? Like, you know, it was like a church sale, but it wasn't at a church, it was at my synagogue. And so I bought this record for like 25 cents, and it was Walter Bishop Jr. and Jimmy Garrison, and the drummer was J.T. Hogan. And I just fell in love with the sound of the trio when I heard that record. And at that point, I just said, I want to play jazz piano. I just fell in love with it. And funny thing is, about like many years later, in the late 90s, I got to go to Japan for a month. And the first night we got there, I got to my hotel room and they had this satellite radio, which back then was that was unheard of in this country, but it was already a thing there. And I turned on and they had different radio stations, and they had this radio station, I think maybe it was like either All Muse or All that hard bop or something, some category of jazz, and I turned on the radio, and the first thing that came on the radio was that record, a cut from that record. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I really come full circle from hearing that record for the first time as in my early teens to going on a tour in Japan and hearing that record in the hotel, my first tour in Japan, actually my only tour in Japan. But that was really amazing, So so that's when I got really excited about jazz, when I first heard that Walter Bishop record. And I ended up taking a few lessons with Walter Bishop.
Really? Oh wow.
When I was in my teens. Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, that's that story.
Wow. Did you then go through the usual transcribing all the players from Harvie and Chick, and I don't know, going back to Bud Powell and everyone?
Oh yeah, sure.
Learn the...
Oh yeah, transcribed everyone going back beyond Bud Powell, which, yes, of course, Bud Powell, Wynton Kelly, Harvie, Chick, even some sax players, Hank Mobley, George Coleman. I transcribed even going back to Earl Father Hines, who I consider one of the links. I consider one of the links between the swing era and the bebop era, and so yeah, but I never, like some people, they do hundreds of transcriptions. I did maybe, I don't want to say, I did hundreds. I did my fair share, but I think I did fewer than other people. But what I did do with each of those transcriptions is I really learned them. Like I not only learned the notes, but I internalized, and this is something my former teacher, Richie Byrak, taught me. I internalized the phrasing and the articulation, because that's an important part of the jazz vocabulary as well. So it wasn't just learning the notes; it was internalizing those other aspects. Is the phrase behind the beat? Is it on top of the beat? Is it on the beat? How is this being articulated? Is it short? Is it long? Which notes are being emphasized more? Which are louder, which are softer. So I think it's better for young players, like, instead of going crazy transcribing everything under the sun, just pick something and really dig more deeply into it. And another thing is, I know everything's available on the internet now. When I was doing this, you couldn't just go on the internet and find any transcription of any solo. I think it's really important to do your own transcribing. That helps you really learn it, rather than, and it also helps your ears. It develops your ears, So I think that's another important thing, is to actually do the transcription, not just find it online for young players.
Oh yeah, I agree, absolutely. Yeah, it's just not, nowadays it's scary. I think you write almost any solo transcription and you get it. It's crazy. It's really half of the existing solos have been transcribed almost .
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. It's great that you can hear, any musician and any time. But there's also something to be said for you've got. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this. It's great. It used to be maybe you had $20 in your wallet and you could just buy a couple of records or a couple of CDs, and you had to pick the ones that were really great, okay, these are the ones everyone says I should have, these are the seminal records, and now you can just listen to anything anytime, and I just wonder if people are really paying attention, when it's always there and it's always available to you, how much are they really listening, how carefully.
No, I agree, absolutely. Yeah, I remember I had my lunch money, and instead of going for lunch, I bought records, and then you had 2 CDs. I was like, shit, I could buy only one. I was like, okay, I'll get this one, and then I just listen, and you remember those things, and it was romantic in a sense, also LPs, because there's the booklet, and that's part of the experience, right? Which is nowadays actually gone with the digital world. I think it's I don't know, or I'm getting older as well. So
yeah, I don't even know. I look at records. Yeah, right. We sound like old fogies. I know. But when I look at like the streaming sites, like I'm trying out different streaming sites to decide which one, because I finally realized I just have to give in and go with the stupid streaming thing.
Yeah.
But I was trying out Amazon for a while. I ended up canceling it. I'm gonna try another one. But one of the things I didn't like about it was that you really can't tell who the personnel are on the record.
Yeah.
You can always Google it, but that's a lot of extra steps. It used to be, like you said, like you just pick up the record, the LP or the CD, and you open it up or you look at the back and it tells you exactly who was playing. And then you might read the liner notes and just get interesting insight or information that way. And you don't get that with streaming.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yes, but part of the romance of listening to an album is gone with this way. That's why people, I think, they just scroll a little bit through the music, and which is a shame. You lose the arc of a record and everything, like the storyline, and but yeah, there we are.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, but how did you enter? I mean, I've read you had quite an interesting Lionel Hampton story, which kind of brought you into the scene, right? Like, how did you slowly enter actually the New York scene, which is still so competitive and immense? I mean, what was your story there?
Sorry, you're breaking up a little. I have trouble hearing you.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe it's my connection. No, I just wanted to ask you, how did you begin, entering? Let's see.
I see you again.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Back.
No, sorry, I don't know whether whether it's my connection.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll cut these.
No, I think it is, because a message came up on my screen that said something about that you had a slow connection.
Yeah.
And also I didn't get disconnected. I was still here. Yeah, it says your network bandwidth is low. It's saying.
Yeah, we're in the countryside, so it's like sometimes we had a storm today, so maybe it's something I don't know, a tree fell on something. I don't know. But I wanted to ask you, how did you enter the scene? After college, and who were the first connections kind of you made in New York, actually? I mean, how did you start?
Still waiting to enter the scene.
No.
Well, it was very hard. Honestly, when I moved back, I'm from New York, but I didn't really know any musicians here because I went to school in Boston. So when I came back in the very late 80s, it was like I think the fall of 89, it was really pretty much a closed door for women musicians. I mean, except for a handful. There were a handful that were just so exceptional, undeniable, and everyone always says, well, they could do it. But not everybody is exceptional and undeniable when they're 23 years old. And most male musicians, they still get the opportunity to learn and to grow. But for women, it's like, if you're not like a genius at 23, then you're just kind of discounted. Or then that's how it was. It's a lot better now for a number of reasons, I'm happy to say. But it was very hard back at that time for women musicians. There was a lot of discrimination, and I mean, men outright telling me, like, jazz is male dominated, and it's always been that way, and it should be that way, and it's always going to be that way. And so it was very hard. It wasn't like 100%, but there was a lot of that. So just over the years, I think I just met, become friends with a lot of people. I made friends and developed musical relationships, colleagues. I mean, a lot of the relationships I guess I would say, like, one of the first musicians I met in New York that I still play with is Virginia Mayhew, phenomenal tenor player. Yeah. And I played with her for the first time at the 55 bar, like must have been around 91 or something, really? 1991. Wow. And I remember I was late for the gig. There was something terrible happened, and I was like, I don't remember what it was. I was living in Jersey City at the time, and there was like some horrible Holland tunnel, and I walked in late, and I said, I just want you to know I'm never late. I'm really sorry. This is not who I am, like being a person who's late to gigs. And she said, a little skeptical, she said, okay, if you say that, I'll believe you. So I've always made sure never to be late, for any gig, but especially for Virginia. But anyway, we're good friends. She's one of my dear friends now. For many years. So we played a lot over the years. We were in Diva together, the all-female band years ago, back in the 90s. Just a lot of people. My husband Billy and I have been playing together, obviously, pretty much the whole time that we've been together, which is like over 20 years now.
Wow.
There's lots of people that I've played with over the years. There's some people those are two people that I feel like I just keep growing with them. We all keep growing together and getting better. There are other musicians that, you play with when you're younger, and then maybe, as you get older, you kind of outgrow the situation or whatever, I'm trying to think. I know there are other great musicians that I've played with for a long time. It's hard to remember all the names, but basically I just started hanging out, going to jam sessions, meeting different musicians, and then people recommended me to other people. I don't feel like I'm like at the center.
I wanted to ask you, how did you end on that Lionel Hampton project record? I mean,
yeah, so that was thank you for reminding me. So one of the first people I played with, it was a quintet that was run by these two horn players, a trumpet player named Patrick Rickman and a tenor player named Lance Bryan. And actually, funny thing is, this is, like I said, this is like 30 years ago. Funny thing is, I've been playing a little with Lance over the last year or so. He's got a couple of bands that I've been subbing in, and it's kind of funny because I hadn't seen him in many, many years. But he and Patrick, they had this quintet, and a lot of great players came through that band when they were starting out. I remember that's how I met Alvester Garnett in that band, who since went on to great things. There's I think Joe Martin might have played in that band, although don't quote me on that. I know Alvester did. I'm not sure about Joe, but a lot of great players came through that band. And anyway, so you're asking about Lionel, right? So what happened is, Patrick, with the trumpet player, he was playing in Lionel Hampton's band, and Lionel had a gig. I don't remember. It was some concert in New Jersey actually, and his regular piano player for some reason couldn't do it, and Patrick recommended me, and I did the gig, and maybe it was more like 93 or 94 now that I think about it. Okay. Anyway, I did the gig, and that's how I met Lionel Hampton. I just did one gig with him because the regular piano player didn't miss too many gigs, and he really just liked my playing, and he said, I want to do a record with you, and I'm thinking like, oh, come on, that's not going to really happen. But it was like, okay, and then he called me up, he actually called me like, Roberta, this is Lionel Hampton. So I, so I ended up playing on this record that he did. It might have been one of the last records he ever did, but it was kind of cool because I went to his home and I helped him out with the arrangements and playing on one tracks, just like as kind of pianist, and I got to meet a lot of interesting musicians and play with a lot of musicians. On the track that I'm on, Ron Carter played bass.
Yeah,
Wallace
exactly.
Roney, the late great Wallace Roney,
crazy, yeah.
Played trumpet, and trying to remember who else was on it. So embarrassing that
Roy Haynes, right, is on drums.
Freaking out on names. Yeah, Roy Haynes, thank you.
Yeah.
How embarrassing. Yeah. So like that was insane, this all-star band, and me, it was my first record, the first CD I was on. So that was kind of ridiculous, these like all-stars and me. So that was kind of a cool, amazing thing that happened. But that's how that happened. It was just, I just did one gig with Lionel as a sub, and somehow he just kind of, just called me up.
Amazing. Did you, meanwhile, when you were in New York, started to lead your own bands immediately? I mean, because, since the mid-90s, since Unbroken Line, the crisscross one, you've done like so many records. Like, when did you start band leading, actually?
Yeah, the crisscross record, I think I recorded in 97. It came out maybe 98.
Yeah.
but yeah, I've always been a band leader. When I was younger, it's funny, we were talking about composing earlier, and I composed a lot more when I was younger. And you know, I wasn't as busy with side musician projects, so I also had more time. So I did a lot of writing and quintet, sextet, just trio, you know. Part of that was also when I was studying with Richie Byrack, and he was big on composing as a way to develop your personal voice as player. So that also was an added motivation to compose. So yeah, I was always playing and trying to, you know, play gigs around town. And I remember when I became friendly with Marion McPartling, she heard me play at a competition and had me on her show. And then she actually said to me, you know, when you do these gigs, you should try to promote them. You should like send information to the local press and things like that. So then I got into this whole thing of like sending out the info and doing press and stuff. But honestly, I'm not sure it was really worth it at the time, you know. But you know, that goes back to that whole thing of like when things happen when you are not trying to make them happen. But yeah, so I was always sort of a natural band leader because I always was writing and had a point of view, for sure, you know. And I still I wouldn't say I have a formal band, you know, but I still do gigs as a band leader. You know, I don't really have the mental fortitude to you know, email some club owner 20 times.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
gig.
I know.
So
when
that's what it takes, I just won't do it anymore. I don't want to be bothered with it. But fortunately, there are a couple of places I get to play where I don't have to do that. And those are the places I play, even if it's not that often, you know. But because I'm also playing more as a side person, it's not as important to me to even though I would love to be working as a band leader all the time, but if I have enough side person gigs that are satisfying, then that helps fill some of that, you know. And also, I live with a great drummer. You know, I live with Billy Mintz. How lucky am I? You know, so we play a lot together in the house. You know, and I'd rather play in the house with him than go out and play with, you know, someone who's not so good. So I just kind of do the gigs I want to do and the gigs that come my way without too much effort. I'm not belittling anyone who has that energy and stamina to do that hustle. I did it for many years. I just haven't. It gets to a point where I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, no, I know. I understand you completely. Yeah, I mean, I know I've been organizing tours also for what 20 years, and it's frustrating. You write 100 emails and then maybe you get one answer. So it's like. It's such a struggle always. But I wanted to ask you about the Crisscross record. How did that story?
Using the time.
Yeah, sorry.
How did it start?
Yeah,
well, I recorded the record on my own. I you know, that was completely mine. Richie Byrack produced it. I was studying with him at the time. And then that way back then is when I actually did shop it to a bunch of labels, you know.
Oh, okay.
And Crisscross, well, actually it was supposed to come out on some other label that I don't even remember the name. It was like really small label. Nobody even heard of it. And then he went out of business. And I remember he tried to keep my publishing. I'd signed over my publishing to him and he tried to keep it. And then finally he realized he couldn't get away with that since the record wasn't coming out and he gave it back. But anyway, so I sent it to Crisscross and they, Jerry Teakins at the time, I think he's passed away since then, obviously. But he agreed to put it out. So it was an unusual situation because usually he came to New York, he recorded a bunch of records, and then he put them out. But in this case, this was a record that had already been recorded, mixed and mastered. It was actually recorded and mixed by the great David Baker, the great engineer who is no longer with us. And I was really lucky to get, I mean, engineers like that I don't even know if they even exist anymore. You know, he was really from a different time. And he recorded it direct to 2-track. So there was actually no mixing. What am I saying? There was no mixing. It was direct to 2-track. He mixed it on the fly and it was genius. And the only reason he agreed to do my record is that Richie Byrack asked them to do it, and they had a long-standing relationship because I was nobody and no one had ever heard of me. And I remember calling him, and his wife picked up the phone and said, "No, he's too busy. He won't do it." So, but Byrack convinced him to do it. His wife. I don't blame his wife. She was just trying to protect him.
Sure.
So anyway, it was a great record. Of course, Javon
nice
Jackson
record,
and the great Donny McCaslin, did it, and Jeff Williams and Mike Formanek in the rhythm section.
How did you get the band together, actually? How did you decide, especially the rhythm section?
How did I put the band together?
Yeah, especially like Formanek and Jeff Williams. When did you hook up with those guys?
Well, I met Jeff. He was playing at the 55 bar. That's when I heard him, and I just, really loved his playing. And we started playing. We played together for a long time.
Yeah.
And Formanek, I don't even remember how I met Mike. It's just been so long, But I guess he had done a few gigs, with us, and then I don't even remember how I first met Javon. But I remember doing a rehearsal. Javon asked me to do a rehearsal with him. And I got to play with Joe Chambers. He was in the rehearsal.
Ooh, wow,
so that was kind of nice. And Donny, I just knew like through Brooklyn and musicians. We'd both been in Boston at the same time. I don't really remember exactly how we met, but, we were just like, I haven't seen him in many years, but, we were friends, and so, I just put the band together. And anyway, so that was I don't know if there's another record on Crisscross where the music wasn't recorded and produced by Jerry, where it was done separately, and then he took on the project. And the other interesting thing about that record is that I don't know if this record still stands, but I was the first female band leader on the Crisscross label. Yeah. He had never ever had a female band leader release a record on Crisscross up until that time. So that was kind of a notable event as well. And it also shows you how different things were back then, that would be unheard of now, that a label would not have any women band leaders. But back then it was actually quite common. So I feel like I broke some ground on with the Crisscross label with that.
Definitely, yeah.
Also, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Scott Wendholt was also on the record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Scott Wendholt was on the record. Unbroken line. Yeah, I forgot to mention Scott.
How did all these records that you made, like with Masa or Jeff, and with Michael and Jeff Williams, and then like the trio with Rufus and Billy Hart, you played with some amazing players. How did these records happen? Like, how did you decide for a certain band? Or
sometimes you just ask people.
Yeah.
I always had the feeling that, like, if I ask the best players to play, I'm going to improve. I'm going to get better.
Oh, man.
The more I play with better players, So I'm going to just, ask people, and they can say no. What happened is, what happened is I was walking down through the village one night in the late 90s, or maybe like 2000 or 1999, or maybe it was somewhere around there. And I ran into Rini Rasa. She was actually, I think she was in a car, and she stopped the car and she said, "Roberta, Todd Barkin is looking for a female pianist." This is one of those times when it actually worked in my favor, worked in my favor. So she said, "Todd Barkin is looking for a female pianist to do some records for a Japanese label. So you should get in touch with him," or something, So, or maybe, I don't remember, like she gave me his number, or, I gave her my number. I don't remember. But anyway, she got back in the car and drove off. And somehow I reached out to Todd Barkin, or he reached out to me.
Dr. Jazz.